Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a massive theme: how to take chaotic, entirely unpredictable business environments and systematically turn them into rock-solid strategy. It's all about finding the signal in the noise, and to do that, we're looking at the foundational tools of strategic management. But right out of the gate, I want you to think about this. How do businesses actually survive when the world just flips upside down? Sudden economic shifts, massive tech disruptions, or, I don't know, a global pandemic? When chaos hits, the best companies don't just guess their way out of it. They use specific analytical tools that act as a compass. These tools help leaders understand exactly where they stand and exactly where they need to go. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for the explainer. We're going to start with the situation analysis foundation, decode the SWOT matrix, look at how to move beyond basic lists, check out strategy in action with Walmart, and finally, wrap up with turning strategy into execution. All right, part one, the situation analysis foundation. Look, before we can even touch SWOT, we absolutely have to get a grip on the broader context, the situation analysis. Basically, this is about gathering the raw data before any actual strategizing happens. And to do it, a company has to look in two completely different directions at the exact same time. On one hand, you look inward at your internal environment. These are your controllable factors, stuff like corporate culture, resources, and the organizational structure. But on the flip side, you have to look outward at the external environment. These are the forces you have absolutely zero control over: macroeconomic trends, rapid tech changes, new laws, and whatever your competitors are up to. You can really see here just how massive the scope of this tracking is for managers. Over on the internal side, you've got your human resources, your physical assets, your profit flows. But then, on the external side, the business is just being bombarded by outside forces, everything from the climate and legal shifts to the media landscape. A good strategist is constantly, and I mean constantly, scanning all these variables to figure out how they mesh. Which brings us to part two, decoding the SWOT matrix. So how on earth do you make sense of that absolute mountain of environmental data? Well, you take all those findings and organize them into 4 pillars. It's a brilliantly simple grid that deliberately separates the internal elements, that's your strengths and weaknesses, from the external elements, the opportunities and threats. Let's break these down real quick. First up, strengths. These are your internal qualities, your core competencies. It's the stuff you just do better than anyone else. We're talking proprietary tech, insane brand recognition, or a wildly skilled workforce. These are your intrinsic value-creating assets. When you're building a strategy, these strengths, that's the very foundation you build upon. On the flip side of that internal coin, we have weaknesses. These are your vulnerabilities, your capability gaps. Basically, what's putting you at a competitive disadvantage. Maybe it's a poor market image, clunky internal systems, or a lack of funding. These are the inherent limitations that you have to fix, like yesterday, if the company is going to survive. Okay, now let's shift to the external environment, opportunities. These are the favorable conditions or trends happening out there in the wild that your company can jump on. You don't create these, they just sort of emerge from the market dynamics. Think of a new niche opening up, a shift in demographics, or a sudden gap in the industry that you can profitably exploit to grow. And finally, threats. These are the external dangers. Unfavorable conditions like, say, skyrocketing inflation, aggressive new legislation, or a fierce new competitor storming into your space. They are completely outside your control, but they have the power to disrupt or even completely derail your business performance. Moving right along to part 3, moving beyond the lists. Now, what's really interesting about this is the aha moment. Just making 4 separate lists, that is entirely insufficient. Seriously, writing down your flaws isn't a strategy. It's just a depressing diary entry. To get any real value, you have to achieve what's called strategic fit. You do this by cross-referencing your internal traits with those external realities. If you skip this, you might end up calling an external trend an opportunity just because it happens to match something you're already good at. You literally have to force these variables to interact. So the whole game is about asking the right questions. You need to walk through these 4 strategic combos. Number 1, how do we maximize our internal strengths to actually capture those external opportunities? 2, how do we use those strengths to defend against impending threats? 3, how do we minimize our weaknesses so we don't completely miss out on market opportunities? And 4, how do we fix those weaknesses to avoid being destroyed by threats? Answering these exact questions is what takes a static, boring SWOT matrix and turns it into aggressive, actionable business moves. Let's look at how this actually plays out in the real world. Part 4, Strategy and Action with Walmart. Think back to January 2020. A massive, unprecedented external threat hits the macro environment, COVID-19. Walmart didn't just panic. They immediately leaned into their internal strengths, their absolute powerhouse of a supply chain, and their ability to roll out rapid safety protocols. They didn't just defend against the threat, they captured this massive opportunity for remote shopping. By playing to their strengths, their grocery app became the #1 downloaded shopping app by April 2020, and the strategic fit paid off big time. By May 2021, their US comparable sales jumped 6%, and their operating income absolutely skyrocketed by 26.8%. To put that into perspective, let me hit you with this staggering data point: 460%. That was the growth in average daily downloads of Walmart's grocery app by April 2020, compared to just a few months prior in January. 460%. That is exactly what happens when a company flawlessly matches its internal capabilities to a sudden external market condition. All right, on to our final section, Part 5, Turning Strategy into Execution. Because here's the thing, none of that massive growth happens by accident. It is a harsh truth in business that the most brilliant SWOT matrix in the world is completely worthless if you can't actually execute it. Moving from planning to doing requires concrete steps. First, you have to institutionalize the strategy. You need everyone's buy-in. Second, you've got to create an effective organizational climate, one that actually encourages people to cooperate. Third, formulate clear operating plans so budgets and resources actually align with your goals. And finally, conduct periodic reviews so you can adapt when things inevitably change. The source material emphasizes this over and over. Even the best laid plans fall short if they are not put into practice properly. The pitfalls here are literally everywhere. The biggest one? Lack of ownership. If nobody is explicitly responsible, nothing gets done. Or poor communication, where employees have no idea what their role even is. At the end of the day, execution is the ultimate test of any strategy. Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. Look at the strategies in your own organization, or even the businesses you study. Are they true strategic plans that actually leverage strengths to capture opportunities and neutralize threats? Or are they just a list of things you happen to be good and bad at? Challenge yourself to elevate your thinking, connect those dots, and really execute. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.